Hey, sports fans, it's world champion handicapper Mike North. Punch this number in your phone right now. If you're driving, pull over. 1-800-808-3419. 1-800-808-3419 for a free pick and info for the premier handicapping site in the country, VegasScoresAndOdds.com. It's the only site you'll ever need with expert handicappers like John Anthony, Denny Macklin, Tony Sacco, Ray Monahan, yours truly, and many more. Check out the homepage of VegasScoresAndOdds.com for a tote board with your buddy. Follow Vegas Scores and Odds on Twitter and dial up 1-800-808-3419. It's 1-800-808-3419, 1-800-808-3419, or go to VegasScoresAndOdds.com.
The following program is suitable for all audiences.
Let's let this hard work pay off. Let's cut it loose, ball out, let's put a lot of freaking points up on the board. Let's go. Every day we improve, right? Yep. Reset, job not done. Yes, sir. Play by play, next play mentality. Love you, bro.
I want you to take a second to think about everything every one of you gave up to be in this position right here. I don't care what you did. You had to give something else to have this opportunity. So take advantage of it tonight. Play ball like you love it. Here we go.
Come on, boy. Let's eat up, man. Get it.
Like we talked about earlier this week, it's the opportunity for us to stack this game. Let's go ahead and execute. Let's be the playmakers out there. Let's go. Playmakers on three. 1, 2, 3. Playmakers. Yeah.
I'm going to challenge you right now for greatness. Yes, sir. You got me? Yes, sir. You take this thing over right now. Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. Trubisky throwing left side of the end zone. Catch is made. Touchdown Bears.
Attaboy! Attaboy! Great job.
Snap. Trubisky throws the slant right. Robinson in the end zone. A well-executed drive puts the Bears in front.
Come on, boys. Kick out. Demo, hell of a run, bro.
Bearlissimo.
Welcome to the debut episode of Bearlissimo, the George Bayless show. My name is Aldo Gandia. I am his sidekick. George, are you nervous? Tell me how you're feeling right now.
I'm calling the Penguins, but Aldo, how's that for cool? Yeah, obviously I'm a little bit nervous. First time on my own flying solo, but you got to do it sometime, haven't you? Got to step out the nest and see if you can fly.
Yeah.
So let's see if I crash. Let's see if I crash and burn, or let's see if I can fly, can flap those wings and fly.
I can assure you, the last thing you're going to do is crash and burn. Your knowledge of the Chicago Bears and of football is well known throughout the Twitterverse and on YouTube with your videos. I'm excited about partnering with you on this. I want to immediately get going here and have you kind of identify for your followers, and there's tons of people pouring into the chat room now on our Mixler.com channel. This show is live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central. Tell us what your issues were with the Chicago Bears in 2019.
Well, I think the issues the Chicago Bears have been in the making more than just this year, if I'm honest. It was apparent in the first season that we benefited a lot from health and turnovers on defense, and that helped mask some issues with the transition in the offense. And I think that transition in the offense is still happening, both for Nagy as a play caller and head coach. It's obvious that he needs to decide which of those things he's going to be, because until he's in the flow of both, he can't do both. So he's got to do one or the other until he's got that down pat, and then he can focus on those other things, because things like situational football, the right kind of play calls for down and distance and field position, what was going on the field, the fact that he was missing when, for example, when Mitch wanted to go hurry up, when there might be a review triggered, things like this. All these sorts of things were sort of teething problems that we didn't really get in the first year. We got them in the second year, and that coincided with the fan base having such a great first year, such a romance first year with him, maybe setting some expectations that were a little bit too high, and I think we're all guilty, myself especially, of that. So I think going into next year, that's the first place we need to start with, is with Nagy. And what I would like to see him do is to maybe either decide that he's going to be the head coach and do the head coach stuff, or he needs to get an old head on the sideline that he says, right, you deal with the situational stuff, I'm dealing with the playbook, which kind of, is he then a head coach? So for me, he needs to step back from the play sheet and maybe hand that over and trust someone with that, and I think that trust is going to be the key to the next hire. But I'm actually excited to see that he now seems to be getting in coaches that he has an understanding with, and he has some sort of working relationship with, that know him, know his style, know the system, know how he likes to coach, and have worked with him, on sort of a daily and over years basis with Coach Juan Castillo hire, which I think is a great hire. I put a video out on Twitter where it's just literally a coaching clinic with him speaking at the front, and he gave up so much knowledge, and he showed you examples of not only high draft picks, low draft picks, free agents, and undrafted free agents who he had improved through his coaching. That is going to be the key to our offense this year. Unless that offensive line is fixed, and I mean continuity, same 5 guys all season long in the same 5 positions, so that you have that sort of contiguous relationship of knowing what the guy next to you is doing. Because without that, I can tell you as a former, when I got a bit older and a bit fatter and a bit bigger, moved to the offensive line from the backfield. Uh-huh. And when you make that transition, you've got to know what the guy next to you does. You've got to know where he's weak, and then you can identify from the guys you're playing against, okay, he's going to struggle with that, so I can keep an eye out. I know that we're going to have to go this way, so I'm going to have to get across quicker because he's going to struggle to get off otherwise. You know all of these sort of peccadillos about the way each one plays, and that's going to be the key to getting any push up front for the run game, which we showed with inside zone and sort of power scheme. We could run that, but that's not Nagy. So Juan Castillo is West Coast offense, pass first, set up the run later, use situational running when it's to its advantage. He's that mindset. He's that coaching method. He's a former linebacker, believe it or not, which he goes through at length, but that's going to be interesting to see that. Obviously, tight end, we had injuries, people not being on the field, and a lack of production when they were. That's got to get fixed. Mitch, I feel, from my analysis, certainly from looking at sort of pre-snap what the defenses were showing to post-snap what they sort of rolled to or they disguised the coverage, he showed me he can make the reads. And the thing is with Mitch, the less processing he has to do, the more he can just read and react. And that's where Mitch plays best. When he has less time to think about it, when we go hurry up, he plays better. When we're in a 2-minute drill, he plays better. Get into the line fast. Let's go a bit of more of a speed offense, because that helps us as not only coaching, but it helps us, I think, tempo-wise. It helps get at Mitch out of Mitch's head, so he's not thinking too much. Yeah, should we have a 2 overall first-round pick in his 3rd going into 4th year? Should he be in that position? No, but the reason why he's in that position is because of the lack of support that he had in his first year, the lack of trust that he had in his first year, and then the issues that we've seen, obviously, with in year 1 of the system, not everybody knowing what they were doing and where they were going and where they were supposed to be, the route depth, their alignment, all these sorts of things. He was processing all of that for the whole of the offense. Now that's going to settle down in year 3 of the system. That's going to settle down. Guys are going to know where they need to line up. Guys are going to know what the depths are. They're going to know what the sight adjustments are on routes when they see a different coverage. That will start to settle. And I think with that, it's going to be less processing for Mitch. We're going to see an improvement there. Montgomery, really pleased with. The real worrying thing for me on defense was the drop-off under Coach Pagano, a secondary specialist, in the performance of our secondary. And I know that defensive line and a pass rush helps you with secondary, but also your secondary actually helps you pass rush. And we've seen that in the playoffs. We've seen teams, the Vikings, for example, why did they do so well against the Saints? Because they played really good coverage. And they've got a talented defensive line. There's no denying that. They have a talented defensive line. But the situation is they played really good coverage, and that allows your defensive line to get home. Obviously, Akeem Hicks being fit, Eddie Goldman being fit all season. And then it's obviously we're going to get down, which we're going to talk about later, into sort of which free agents of our own we're going to re-sign, or whether we need to fill those spots with other people. But those are the main concerns. Obviously, strong safety needs to get sorted. But the best thing we can do is get Eddie Jackson back to free safety. What's your thoughts?
Well, I've got several of them based on what you just shared. First of all, I want to ask you, how confident are you on Matt Nagy's ability, desire to adjust after 2 seasons as an NFL head coach? There is a narrative developing that Nagy is stubborn-headed, wants to do things his way, wants the quarterback to play in his style. Have you, listening to press conferences, seeing his behavior and so forth, do you have any thoughts on whether Matt Nagy can be like most great coaches in the NFL and adjust to the talent and make personal and I'm saying inward adjustments to his style of coaching to become regularly successful in the NFL?
That's a long question answer, Aldo. It's going to have a long answer, so I'll apologise before I go on. No, I don't have any confidence in Matt Nagy doing that. What I actually have confidence in Matt Nagy being able to do is to motivate people and to keep guys fighting hard and working hard, which is why I actually think he could be a really good head coach. What I don't think he is an offensive coordinator, and I don't think he's an offensive coach. It's clear from the issues with footwork, with reading defenses, with the issues with Mitch particularly. That was a focus of his this year, let's not forget. Him working with Dave Ragone in the quarterback room. He said that at the start of the season. That was his focus. That was a concern to me because we didn't see the development. We actually saw some regression in some areas and sort of panic at one stage of the system until we got back to running the stuff the offensive line can run. There is a stubbiness. I didn't come here to run the I formation. Well, guess what? I mean, in that last game against Minnesota Vikings in the third quarter, we ran inside power. We ran from the I formation. We ran from under center, and we averaged nearly 6 yards of play on running. If you're not able to be cognizant to realise that you're having success at something and that you can use that then to set up other things, go as pass happy as you want once you've got the safeties committed to the box. No problem at all. Once you know you've got single coverage on the outside, by all means, chuck it deep. Let's just let it fly. Let's go, sexy Rexy Grossman. F it, I'm chucking it deep, which is the way that he used to play. But in all seriousness, I mean that's my main concern with Nagy is that he appears to be a better motivator than he is a coach. He appears to be a better leader of men than he is a play caller. He abandons the run far too quickly. He doesn't stick with situational football, which draft Dr. Phil has said ad nauseum, and obviously Shane has picked up. That's my main issues with Nagy, and no, I don't think I can see him changing that, if I'm honest, which is why I think that OC hire, if he is going to go with another OC, sorry, I'm just... I've had an endoscopy today, so a bit of personal information. Yeah, so my throat is a little bit hoarse, but bear with me. No pun intended. So I mean that's where I am with Coach Nagy. Is do I think he can be a great leader of men? Yes. Can he be a great head coach? Absolutely. Because the great head coaches are the ones that get everybody on the team fired up in their own way. They're the ones that know which buttons to push for each player. They don't necessarily need to be a great individual position coach to be a great head coach. You need to be able to know what to do in the right moments to get the right result. And now you need to have trust with those other coaches that they're going to get the guys in the right positions. They're going to get them coached up in the techniques. They know the scheme and what we're looking for, and they're teaching the guys that. It's not just about sort of, fundamental. That's key. You've got to have the right fundamentals, but you've got to understand why. You've got to understand what you're doing and why, where that leads into, where that fits, what happens if we don't do that. You've got to have a plan B and a plan C for every single step. And that's where he's going to have to hand off to these other coaches. Right. He can't oversee the whole lot. I think he did a little bit too much of that this year on offense, particularly, completely foregoing the defense. He needs to be a head coach, make the coaches accountable to him, let them do their jobs. They're either good enough or they're not. So it's got to be his staff, and I think we're going to see that on offense. I'm unsure as to whether we see that on defense. That's my concerns with Nagy.
Excellent. Now, one of the things you talked about in your open was about Eddie Jackson and the secondary. My concern, particularly with Eddie Jackson, is that Pagano asked him to play too close to the line, and that way it nullified his greatest asset, which is playing center field. What do you think could potentially happen there? Are we going to see, particularly now that Eddie Jackson's been signed to the highest paid contract for a safety in the NFL, you got to utilize his strengths, which is go out there, play center field, and react to balls thrown anywhere in your vicinity.
So free safety, the reason why free safeties get paid more than strong safeties is because strong safeties are like the defensive secondaries running backs. They're the guys that are going to come down in the box. They're going to do a lot more hitting near the line. They're going to take a lot more wear and tear, and they're probably going to break down a bit quicker than the true free safeties are. The true free safeties of the world, the guy that can take away the deep ball completely, by tracking. Eddie's shown that. Eddie can turn a deep pass into 6 points the other way. Eddie can turn a baited throw in disguised coverage to 6 points the other way when he's playing the deep centre field and when he's allowed to roam that deep centre. Now, the reason why he thrived in the year that we had the stellar production was because Adrian Amos was that guy up at the line of scrimmage and hitting people, and he was a true enforcer. And that's why I think we need to go more to, rather than having sort of two deep safeties, and then you roll one up, roll one down. Yeah, I see the benefit of that because the QB isn't going to look at these guys and say, right, well, that's the free safety, that's the strong safety, they're going to alternate. Yeah, I get that. But it's not maximising your guys' skills.
Right.
Now, if you do it well, if you get a guy who's up at the line, it doesn't matter which guy, it doesn't matter if the QB knows it or not, you can still drop that guy back out of the box.
Right.
You can still drop him into coverage and have him as a robber. You can still send him on a blitz. You can still do things to trick the QB with that safety in the box. It doesn't matter. It doesn't detract from the fact that Eddie Jackson, being that deep centre fielder, is going to maximise his contract value. We don't want him to get worn down physically. We don't want him to get broken down physically. And to be honest, it's not playing to his strengths. Yeah, he's a willing tackler. Is he a forceful tackler? No. He's a solid tackler, but he's not a hitter. And the thing that he does is he sees the ball, he knows what they're going to do, he can cover any receiver one for one. We saw that. PFF's one praiseworthy tweet to the Bears this year was on Eddie Jackson on his coverage 1-to-1 with Amari Cooper. That shows the strength of his coverage. One of the best route runners in the game had him in his pocket. That's where we need to have Eddie Jackson. That's where the dollar value, that's why he got paid what he got paid. So yeah, we need to drop Eddie back. You're absolutely spot on, and yeah, drop him back, and we need to get an enforcer in the box. And we have some guys that could come back and potentially do that job, but there are some guys in free agency as well that also I think that are in that mold. So, and the thing is as well, with them being the type of guys that get worn down, the dollar value comes down. A strong safety is much easier to get in free agency than a true free safety. Mm-hmm. That's why we paid Eddie. That's why we extended him, because those guys are rare.
Right.
You're not going to find them, and you're really lucky. I mean, to get one in the fourth round, that's Tom Brady type value. So you have Tom Brady at QB in the sixth round. Finding a true free safety who takes the middle of the field away in the fourth round is that kind of value. It's ridiculous.
It's very good point.
Drop Eddie back.
Yep. Now, one thing that you did not mention in your open and is of a concern for me, so I'd love for you to comment on, is strength and conditioning. It seemed to me that was an issue not only in 2019, but in 2018. We saw winded players. We saw players who perhaps weren't as powerful at the point of attack. I spent a lot of time at Bourbonnais over the last 2 years with Nagy as the head coach, and it seemed like the camp perhaps was not run as aggressively from a physical standpoint as prior head coaches. And I understand that there's been a move in the NFL to protect players and limit the amount of contact in practices and preseason. But do you, as an expert in the game of football, look at this team and see that there might be an issue with strength and conditioning, and that perhaps there needs to be some changes, not necessarily in personnel, the people who are responsible for those areas, but perhaps in terms of technique or philosophy?
I'm not sure whether it's a strength and conditioning issue as it is a usage issue.
Okay.
And when I say that, it's like the strength and conditioning. The guys are in the weight room, they're doing the work. Okay, so they're running on air. That's fine. So the aerobic side of things is not going to be so much of an issue because it's the contact stuff, which is where he was holding people out. Now there are certain positions where you can afford to do that. A quarterback in preseason games, you're not going to see the same blitzes. You're not going to see the same coverages. It's going to be pretty vanilla. There are very few teams that are going to play like a rolled coverage, a disguised coverage in the preseason because they don't want to give that away. That's the thing that causes quarterbacks to have, to see ghosts, as Darnold put it. So you're not going to see that at quarterback in the preseason very often, rarely. So it's a case of if you're installing stuff, for 1 or 2 series, and you want to install some plays, put them in 1 or 2 series. The guys who do need to be in there are the lines. Those guys that are going to be taking contact all year, those guys that need to be callous. So your wide receivers, not so much. They need to know what the routes are. They're going to see vanilla coverage. Is there a benefit to that in terms of learning the playbook, etc.? If you're putting new plays in, yes, so 1 or 2 series, fine, no problem. The offensive line needs to play more. The tight ends who are going to be in contact need to play more. The running backs and fullback, if we're going to use one, needs to play more because those guys are going to be taking contact all the time. Same with the defensive line, same with the linebackers, and safeties as well. To an extent, are going to have to be there because they're going to have to come up. That strong safety's going to have to play a series more than Eddie Jackson is, because those guys are going to be coming up, and you have to get battle hardened. You have to get calloused.
Right.
And that's the only thing. That's the only way you can do it is by actually sort of being in live fire, being in live action. You're making the hits, you're making the tackles, you're making sure you're getting your form tackles in. But the coverage side of things, the defensive secondary, you could probably say your starting corners play 1 or 2 series. You can then drop them out. Once they've got the shoulder pads warmed up, it's probably time to you can pull them out. But should you hold them out of preseason games altogether? Absolutely not. It's a nonsense. You've got just as much chance of your starting free safety playing Xbox at 2:00 in the morning, slipping on a pizza box and damaging his knee as you are by playing 1 or 2 series. It's that ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Yes.
In Chicago, what are they going to do? Slip getting out of the car and some March ice, and they're gonna do the groin or the hamstring.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's an absolute nonsense. You can't bubble wrap people. What you can do is be sensible about usage, and that's where I think that the difference in strength and conditioning. That's where it needs to come in the usage.
Heart 4803 agrees with you, and we've got lots of comments in the chat room. People congratulating you on the debut show and a new show here at Bears Barroom. His name is George Bayless, a.k.a. Bearlissimo. Brummy Bear says, congratulations. Heidi, your good friend Heidi, says that your voice is so soothing. Faith Trevino wants to know a little bit about your background and where you played football. So why don't we talk a little bit about you? George Bayless, tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you acquire all this football knowledge? And then kind of segue into what you want to do with this show over the next several weeks.
Sure, yeah. So in back in 83-84 season, my older brother was 9 years older than me. I was 10 years old. So he was playing kitted American football over here, which at that time was actually a semi-pro league. So he was playing at a high level. He was a linebacker, very good at defensive, and a real student of the game defensively. He got me into football, and when I was looking around at defenses, 83-84, the Bears were it. And that for me, watching a big brother who's a hero playing the game, and I'm watching these guys on the field just be even more violent than he was on the field, and I'm like, I'm hooked. The fact that Chicago is the twin city with Birmingham, which is the city that's nearest to where I am, it's 12 miles away. The fact that that's the sister city of Chicago, that was just a bonus. I looked at that defense, I was absolutely hooked on it, and that got me into wanting to play football. So at 14 years old, I'm lying about my age to play kitted football. So I for 3 seasons played kitted football in the adults league because I was quite big for my age at 14. Lying about my age, saying that I was 18 years old for 3 years. Different names each year. But the league was so disorganised in those days, you could get away with doing it. And fortunately for me, playing kitted football, I got used to contact very early, and I'm sort of very much of that mentality anyway, which probably didn't bode well for me when I played quarterback, because I wanted to hit people.
Sort of
so
like
when you
Jim
drop it back and
McMahon.
you're looking for a blitzing linebacker, and then you're putting your head in the middle of his chest and seating him, letting him know that you're not going to just sit back and take that. It's probably not the best mentality for a quarterback to have, but I could sling the ball, so I was one of the few kids that could. So that was sort of my introduction to football. But in terms of playing, I played from 14 to 37, 38 years old. The last 3-4 years I was coaching as well for Tamworth Phoenix youth and senior teams. Specialised in defensive line and offensive line in terms of coaching. But I played sort of about 4 or 5 years at the highest level in this country, and I played a season for the Leicester Falcons as well with a quarterback by the name of Bradley Van Pelt, the son of Brad Van Pelt, the Hall of Fame linebacker for the Giants. Played a season with him, who was the incumbent second string quarterback in Denver the year that Jay Cutler was drafted.
How about that?
Yeah, so I got speaking to him at one of the games, and I said, like, what's your thoughts on Jay Cutler? Because I think we were like 1 year into the contract. And he said, you want the truth? And I said, yeah, I want the truth. He says he's an asshole. And I said, what do you mean? Where does that come from? He said, well, as the second string quarterback, my job was to bring him in and to get him up to speed with what we were doing. Jake Plummer wanted nothing to do with it because he knew he was brought to replace. So Jake Plummer wanted nothing to do with him. So it's Brad Van Pelt's job to get him in. And the first thing Jay Cutler said to him, what am I going to learn from you? How to sit on the bench. And that was the souring of that relationship. But I learned a lot from playing with Brad Van Pelt, obviously, ex-NFLer. And I've played against a current NFL player when he was a youngster, which is F.A. Abada. He's a defensive end for the Carolina Panthers. So I have played at a fairly high level. I have played some fairly good players. And I have had some benefit of NFL Europe coaching as well. So they run camps and things over here, and there's coaching conferences and stuff like that. Or every year we get someone from either the collegiate football or from the NFL who comes over and gives symposiums. So I used to keep up to date with that. But obviously since then it's just being a draft absolute nut, being a Bears nut, and just being into football that way.
I know that you love to scout players, collegiate players. But for this debut show, I wanted to do something a little different because obviously things start with free agency. And so I think Ryan Pace has said that, they want to attack areas of need in free agency, and then they kind of can go for the best player available in the draft. So let's talk about some of the areas of need for this team and some of the free agents that you have looked at and identified as possible solutions to some of the problem areas.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing that I did in this exercise was looking at the Bears list of free agents, as in the guys who are coming up, whether they're unrestricted free agents, restricted free agents, or earned rights. We have one earned rights restricted free agent. So looking at it, there's actually 21 players from the squad this year, from the 53, who are out of contract. And obviously we've got Carl Long, who has also gone, so that's 22 players. And we have some potential cuts for roster savings. Although Phil will tell you that the cap is fluid, and there are some guys who are certainly not worth their dollar value, and it makes sense in this year to potentially trade or cut them. If we do that, our current cap, which I believe is round about, correct me if I'm wrong, round about $14 million.
Correct.
That could go up to as much as 41, depending upon what you do. So the first job that I did was go through the list of guys, and I sort of looked at, again, their age, injury issues, whether dollar value that it would take for us to retain them would be worth us doing that, given what we've seen last year. So unfortunately, the top of the list is Danny Trevathan. And last year he earned $7 million, and I can't see him taking much of a discount because he was playing at a very high level. He is a leader on a defense. We do get a lot of benefit from him being there. He has been an absolute fantastic mentor, not only to Roquan Smith, but the other guys sitting behind him. Nick Kwiatkowski's had his best season of his career so far. Kevin Pierre-Louis got in and assimilated very quickly. I don't think, and that's not coincidental with Danny Trevathan being a good leader in that room. But I'm afraid that for me, what we have in cap to what we can commit to the position, it's too much dollar value, and I think he's going to be one of the guys that we let go. Chase Daniel next on the list. Is he worth $5 million of cap room? He's not. $5 million, a little bit up from that, we could be looking at someone who could be a potential fill-in starter. And we'll come on to the quarterback room. So Chase Daniel is a cut. Not re-sign. Clinton Dix, no. With $3 million he earned this year, and we didn't see anything like. I would have actually, from the middle of the season, where it looked like we weren't going to make the playoffs, I would have preferred to have seen Dion Bush. I would have preferred to have seen Dion Bush in that strong safety role, and then we could have maybe rolled Eddie back to free safety, have Dion up in the box, because he's that type of safety. We'll come on to Dion Bush. Sherrick McManus, I'm afraid, 2 injured this year, and the year previous. Excellent special teamer, 32 years old. We're looking at around about the $2 million cap mark if we want to re-sign him. Unless he's going to take a discount and take that minimum. Again, he's cut. Aaron Lynch, cut. No point discussing that one. Bradley Sowell, cut. Ted Larson, cut. Nick Williams, re-sign. Nick Williams, I think, is going to take around about $1.5 to $2 million, looking at the sort of comparable level. There might be a team that outbids us for him because he had, 6.5, 7 sacks?
Correct.
And there might be a team that looks for that and say, right, we think he can be our defensive end in our starting rotation, and he could be earning up to sort of $5 million kind of level. He's a man of faith. He loves being at the Bears. He's messaged me privately on Twitter apologising for the way that the defence played this year. I told him there's no need to worry about it. But he's that kind of guy. And that for that reason, I think we could get him for sort of a mid-level, sort of $2 million, round about that kind of figure, potentially, sort of a 2-3 year deal. So he's a re-sign. Cornelius Lucas, cut. Patrick Scales re-signed, but you're looking at vet minimum kind of dollars. So he probably wouldn't count against the cap, because don't forget it's only your top, I think it's 47 that count against the cap. But it's the top, is it 51? I'll have to familiarise myself with the rules. I'm a little bit discombobulated at the moment. Patrick Scales, so he's a re-sign. He's going to be around about the vet minimum kind of level. Kevin Pierre-Louis, this is going to be an interesting one. For me, he's a must re-sign. He's an excellent special teamer. He showed he can be starter level at middle linebacker. He also showed he can be a situational pass rusher. Mm-hmm. That potentially fills 2 spots for us. That's why, for me, he's one of the priority free agents. Only 26 years old, excellent level. He's not shown a longevity of production at this level. He's been a bit of a sort of a journeyman, not really done much of anything. So again, I think unless a team falls in love and tries to outbid us on him, he's a guy that as an unrestricted free agent that we can get at a decent level. Then we're getting down to Brent Urban. If we can get him back at the vet minimum, he's a solid defensive end. TJ Clemmings, that for me is a cut or vet minimum. For me, it's a cut. DeAndre Houston Carson, that's a re-sign. Again, you're looking at sort of vet minimum kind of levels. I can't see him getting any money, much more money than that anywhere else. Nick Kwiatkowski, he's a re-sign for me, because I think he would be the starter with Roquan. Roquan would be the coverage guy. Nick would be the enforcer. So he'd be the Mike, and then obviously you'd have the strong linebacker that would be in the middle as well. That would be your Roquan, who'd be making the calls. So he's a re-sign. Nick Quitt, again, I think you're looking around about the sort of $2 million mark for him. Dion Bush is an unrestricted, and then we're at the end of the unrestricted free agents. Dion Bush is a re-sign for me. 27 years old, so a little bit older for a guy who's coming out of his first contract. But for me, he's a re-sign. And again, Dion Bush, I think you're looking at around about sort of vet minimum to around about $1 million mark. Mm-hmm. So again, whether he's going to count against your top salaries is debatable. Roy Robertson Harris is a big question mark. Would love to have him back. I think a team is going to look at him and think he could be our 4-3 end. He could be our 3-4 end. I think there's going to be a lot of people, but he's a restricted free agent. So we can either do, there's 3 levels of tenders, as I'm sure you know. There's obviously the original round, which he was an undrafted free agent, which means we just get the option to re-sign him to whatever contract comes on. At that level, I think it's worth tendering him to see whether we want to match. Because if it is a team that comes in, they want to pay him $8 million a year to be a starter, we're not going to match that because it's just too much of a dollar value. But what it does do is put us into potential compensatory pick the next year. So it makes sense to use that restricted free agent. Isaiah Irving, again, I think that's just an offer. I don't think we use the restricted rights. We allow him to test the market if he wants. He's a vet minimum kind of guy, but
right.
he's someone that we've developed. He's very much a bear. Rashard Coward, 25 years old, showed some promise. He really struggled with technique, I think, as they started to try and put more plays in. That was his issue for me. He's still someone that is worthwhile developing at offensive lineman because he shows a desire. He's nasty. In the run game, he's one of the best finishers that we have in the run game when he doesn't overcommit. That's coaching. He's only had 1 year of coaching at offensive line. He's played 2 positions in that 1 year. He is a guy who could become a potential answer after Bobby Massey at right tackle. Re-sign. So again, that's a case of I don't think we're going to have too much. It's not worth a $2 million tender offer for me. It's a guy that we re-sign if we can. Devontae Bond, who? So yeah, he's ignore. And then you've got JP Holtz. He definitely earned to come back. Again, what sort of level? He was on $525,000 last year. I think if you're looking at $1 million for 2 years, something like that, offer him a contract, see if he wants to sign. But again, I don't think we would enforce those rights if it came beyond that. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, potentially 11 leaving, and a potential 3 that we don't re-sign because the amounts are just simply too high. The next thing we need to do is look at roster cuts, potential savings. Leonard Floyd, $13 million. Is he worth that? In this free agent market, there is a lot of guys that can play better than Leonard Floyd on the edge. It's actually quite a saturated position in terms of what you would normally see. Yeah, some of those guys are going to disappear off that list. But for me, $13 million, guaranteed if he gets injured. Leonard has shown some issues with injury. For me, we don't commit that money. That saves us $13 million off the cap. Prince Mukamara saves $9 million if he goes. Kevin Tolliver showed that he's a more physical corner.
Yes,
he's actually probably better in coverage. For me, that's a cap casualty.
Mm-hmm.
Prince, love what he's done. He played very well at the start of the season. Seemed to wear down as the season went on for me.
I agree.
He is a cut for me. Kyle Long did such a selfless thing for the Bears in retiring. In terms of people need to appreciate, this guy retired because he knew it would save us more money against the cap than if we cut him. That, for me, is the ultimate selfless.
That's huge.
Yeah, he made the decision to step away, but he did it in a way that would help the Bears as much as possible.
Thank you for pointing that out, George, because that is another selfless act by Kyle Long, and it just shows his appreciation for the franchise and for the Chicago Bears and for his teammates. And when, hopefully, the confetti is going to be flying on the Chicago Bears in the Super Bowl win, and I hope that he's out there enjoying it as if he were a uniformed player. Please continue.
Yeah, no worries. So the last one on the list, last 2 on the list is Taylor Gabriel. It's a $2 million hit, as in we're carrying $2 million, but it's a $4.5 million saving. That for me is a keep if we can't get a trade for him, but that's where we look for possibly a trade out. There were some teams, I don't know if you remember last year, that were interested potentially in Taylor Gabriel. So we investigate that, see what we can recruit for him. If we find a trade partner for that, he goes in a trade. Adam Shaheen cut, saving of $1.2 million. Not a lot of money, but certainly worthwhile doing for someone who hasn't produced anything. Yes, I know Ryan Pace said Adam Shaheen is baby Gronk and whatever, but I don't believe that. I think at the start of the season, in reality, I mean, the fact we've already brought in tight ends and signed them to future deals, that to me shows that we're kind of done with the experiment of one basketball player who can't play tight end, and we've now moved on to a former USC basketball player who is learning tight end. With no tight ends coach, which is interesting, but there we go. We'll see where that moves on from there. But that leaves us with positional needs now of like a quarterback mid-level compete against Trubisky for the starting job. That's a need. Running back depth is a need, but it's only depth. Guard and tackle, we really do need a starter. Could that be Alex Bars at guard? Could it be Rashard Coward at tackle? Remains to be seen. But we need to look at those positions. I know Shane Morsar, Wasram on Twitter, if you follow him, he's a big fan of Brandon Scherf. For me, I am a big fan of Brandon Scherf, but we're looking at probably $12 to $15 million is the kind of figure that he's going to get. And if we're looking at $40 million total cap that we will have available with all of these cuts, that's a lot of money for a guard for me, particularly there's going to be some good ones potentially in this draft. They're going to be available for us, but we'll move on to later. Tight end, we need at least some competition to come in. JP Holtz deserves to come back. Ben Braunecker deserves to come back. He's a restricted free agent. He's next year. He's a restricted free agent. He's working this year under a $1 million contract, $1.5 million. He is a roster savings if we cut him, but for me, he deserves to stay there because he's a great special teamer and he's shown flashes in the passing game.
Yes.
So, outside linebacker is actually where I think there's a lot of value in this free agent market, potentially as we stand at the moment. The guys that are slated to be free agents, guys that I think are sort of maybe a little bit. Obviously, there's the guys at the top of it that are going to get paid really good contracts, but there's some guys that I know Shane has mentioned, for example, Matt Judon at the Baltimore Ravens. He's the guy that is what Pernell McPhee could have been. Mm-hmm. He's already that. So he's a guy that's going to be sort of a mid-level option. That could be a guy that we get, and he's that man that's opposite Khalil Mack that scoops up all of those sacks. But we'll come on to that because we need at least one, possibly two, in free agency at that position for me. Free safety, it's depth. If we don't sign DeAndre Houston Carson, again, there's going to be some guys that I think might go undrafted. We also have Stephen Denmark coming back. He could fill one of those safety spots, whether it's strong or free. Right. I'm unsure as to what their plan is for him yet, but we'll see. And strong safety, obviously, we need a starter because Amos is not Amos. Bush is depth, and HaHa Clinton-Dix was a starter. So that is where we're going to have to find a starter from somewhere. So then we get on to what are the options. Well, it's. I know there's a lot of people out there that are sort of screaming for Tom Brady or they're screaming for Drew Brees. We have about $40 million in cap, depending upon how much it rises. Are we going to pay that for a 40-plus-year-old quarterback who would be a dead man in the backfield as it stands at the moment behind our offensive line with no run game to help him? I don't see that. So the guys that I'm looking at that as potential options, you're looking at Teddy Bridgewater, which I think someone's going to overpay for him. Marcus Mariota could well be a bargain at around about sort of $6 to $8 million. That's what he was paying on at the end of his rookie deal, but he's no longer a starter. He's an opportunity. Case Keenum, you're looking at him potentially. And then you're looking at sort of guys who are rookies that I liked, but I mean, that would be... I think the fan base would be apoplectic if I named people like Kyle Allen or Taysom Hill or Brandon Allen or Jeff Driscoll or names of this. And Matt Moore, obviously a quarterback at KC. Do we go for another old KC quarterback? I think the fan base would be, again, apoplectic if that happened. So I think the only viable option realistically is Keenum, which would underwhelm. And Mariota, who I think is realistically, that's the guy that we're going to pursue at quarterback. I don't know what you feel about those names.
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts because you just shared a ton of information, excellent information, and there's a lot of commentary in the chat room too. Let's go. A lot of people, by the way, are with you on Mariota being an option, but I want to go to the offensive line and ask you this question. Yeah. Do you think that players like Charles Leno, who did not play as well as he did in 2018, where he ended up playing in the Pro Bowl game as he was an alternate and was promoted to the starting squad, do you think that a offensive line coach like the guy that we got can help Leno get back to that starting quality that we are more accustomed to see him in 2018?
I do. In particular, I think this coach can potentially do that. I think there is an opportunity to get him back to certainly that level, potentially better, because the techniques that this coach seems to favour suit Charles Leno's skill sets. As in his sort of lateral agility, his ability to slide his feet and marry his hips to it, keeping his hands inside, that's a coaching point. The only thing that you can't do with him is change his personality. So whilst I think we can coach the fundamentals, we can get him to do those fundamentals, we can get him to be a good pass protector, I don't think he has the want to be nasty. So he's always going to be a weakness for me in the run game. He's going to be what they call a positional blocker rather than a drive blocker. So he's going to be able to turn people. He's going to be able to use his feet and hips to wall people off. You're never going to see him drive guys off the ball because he just doesn't have it mentally. So yes, he can be coached into that kind of level in pass pro, but for me, he's only ever going to be a positional blocker at running back for the running game. Sorry, and that for me is an issue because you need to have both. You can't limit yourself to sort of what style you're going to try and run because teams will scheme at it, and that's the concern with Charles Leno is that as a left tackle. Teams are going to play on his weakness. They know it. I mean, the whole of the NFC knows what it is. They need to attack the interior this year because there was just lots of confusion with that right guard spot being, an undrafted free agent in his first year at the position, or a wounded vet at the position, and that's what teams did against us. But yeah, Charles Leno can be coached back to that kind of level using fundamentals, using his feet, using his hips, his body position. He can do all of that. What he can't do is turn him into a mauler because he's never going to be that. So there does need to be competition of that. I've got no problem if he slides over. I mean, if you want to keep him on the left and you work around that, fine. But if we can get someone in who's going to supplant him, even if it's a rookie that's going to come in and be able to maul people as well as pass pro, you've got to investigate that option. In terms of free agency, there's not a lot of options there at left tackle that would potentially be better anyway. So his contract, Bobby Moss's contract, they are more expensive to cut than they are to retain. So we're going to have to retain them. We're going to have to work with what we've got. But should they be the starters? Debatable.
Yeah.
And even with that coach, it's going to be a tough ask to get. Massey needs Leno's feet. Leno needs Massey's nasty.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we kind of need to.
Right.
That's what we kind of need to do on that offensive line.
Right. So, given the resources available to the Chicago Bears, let's say they are able to get up to that $40-50 million salary cap space, given the draft assets available to the team, I think it's 7 draft picks. Where are you allocating the most resources? What position area are you hoping to fill with at a high level and say, okay, we're going to spend high draft capital or lots of salary cap space to this position or two because that's the greatest need?
Well, that's what I wanted to investigate in this series because looking at the free agent list, there's only a certain limited number of guys that are going to be on that list, and even some of those are going to disappear because they're going to get re-signed by their current teams. So you have to look at the cap, you have to look at what the dollar value is at each position, and realistically that's what Ryan Pace is going to have to do. He's going to have to spend his dollar wisely, and the most bang for the buck for me in this free agency is at safety and is at outside linebacker. Quarterback, debatable, but we've got to get one. So quarterback, outside linebacker and strong safety, that's the positions I want to see as key in this free agency. Tight end, yes, it's important, but we've shown with these guys, well, certainly under Gilbride's tutelage, long may he rest in coaching purgatory. I actually thought he did a really good job with what he had available to him, and I think that's a harsh get rid. And I think Nagy's already got his next guy in line that he wants, and that's going to be coming over in the off season. But for me, tight end in this off season, you've got some good names at the top of the list that everyone's going to clamour for. But again, the dollar value, you're going to be looking at sort of like, if you want Austin Hooper, you're going to be looking 10 to 12 million. If you want Ebron, you're looking at between 6 and 8 million.
Right.
If you want Henry, you're looking at 8 to 10 million. If you want Eifert, you're looking at 4 million and is an injury risk. Mm-hmm. Do we want 2 tight ends that are talented pass catchers that can't stay on the field? I'm unsure. We're already paying 7 million to Trey Burton. So then you're looking at guys like Nick Vanette or Michael Pruitt, which it makes sense actually. Michael Pruitt is a tight end that most people probably aren't going to have heard of, apart from real nerds. So if I'm losing the audience a little bit, I'll let me know. But he's a guy that if we're going to look at getting Mariota across, he's a guy that's going to be familiar to him. That Mariota, that tight end is a safety blanket. So if you get Mariota, you get Pruitt. And that for me that's a kind of, it's not a flashy signing, but it's a sensible one. It's a good dollar value one. Looking at the strength of this free agent market, that's where I'm talking about. Like, sure, if you're looking at about sort of 12 to 15 million a year, 28 years old, excellent guard. But are we going to pay 12 to 15 million a year out of 40 million for a guard? You're the guard father, so I'm sure you'll be able to identify some guards for us that we'll be able to get.
Absolutely. I got one named Quentin, by the way, who you identified as well prior to the show starting, but we'll get to that. Please go ahead.
Well, we've got a Quentin. We've got a Quentin
exactly.
in this free agency. Quentin Spain. So
that's
I don't know if that feels. But he's a guy. He's a guy that he's definitely. If you want a mauler at right guard, he's your man.
Yeah.
He's had a hell of a year this year. Halapuli Vaitai, I think, is the guard. I'm not going to say that again, don't ask me. At the Eagles, but I mean, again, you're bringing across someone who already knows the scheme. Tackle, there are actually some really good names here on the tackle list. So Jack Conklin, 15 million you're looking at for him, too rich. Would love to have him. We're not going to get him. Brian Bulaga, injury risk, 7 to 8 million. I don't see that we're going to be going for someone like a Brian Bulaga. We might be surprised, but I don't see it personally. Adrian Waddle, you're looking at sort of 4 to 5 million. That's swing tackle kind of money. So that's a possibility. But again, that's something that we'll come on to in the draft. I actually think is a strength in this draft. So we'll get onto that. But this is where the real value is the edge guys. I'm just going to run through some names. I just want to see if any of these whet anyone's appetite in the chat room, or if anyone gets a bit of excitement for this. So, Jadeveon Clowney, Dante Fowler, Shaquille Barrett, Bud Dupree, Jamie Collins, Shaq Lawson, Vic Beasley, Yannick Ngakoue, Matt Judon, Kentrell Brothers. All of those guys are going to be hitting free agency potentially.
Some really nice
So again,
names.
Yeah, there's some guys there who can imagine that sitting outside of Akeem Hicks with Eddie Goldman, Roy Robertson Harris, and Khalil Mack. With any one of those names, they're going to eat. They're going to eat, and they're going to get a lot of sacks sitting on that opposite side. They're going to have the nasty as well. All these guys have shown a want to get to the quarterback and a want to put him down. Never seen that from Floyd, unfortunately. I mean, he's great in coverage, but are you going to pay $13 million for a coverage outside linebacker? You don't want your outside linebacker playing coverage. You want him hitting the quarterback.
Right.
That's why they get paid big bucks in free agency, like Jadeveon Clowney's going to get. You're looking at $20 million for Clowney. You're looking at $15 million for Fowler. You're looking at $15 million for Barrett. You're looking at $17 million for Yannick Ngakoue. You're looking at $15 million for Bud Dupree. But then you get down to names like Vic Beasley. You're looking around about $5 million for Vic Beasley. Shaq Lawson, probably $3 to $5 million. Emmanuel Ogbah, $2 to $3 million. Matt Judon, $5 to $6 million. He's a guy that I'd like to target. I know that Shane Marsaul loves Matt Judon. Jamie Collins, a vet who is very experienced at getting to the quarterback and can play coverage. Imagine a Jamie Collins opposite Khalil Mack. I can. It's exciting. So you're looking around about $5 million for him, $5 to $7 million. Kentrell Brothers around about $2 million. Again, not a massive name, but he's a good player. Yes. So those are the guys that I'm looking. That's where the dollar amount to me seems more sensible. There's going to be at least 4 or 5 names that we need to get 2 spots filled, and we're looking at less money on those 2 spots than we are by cutting Leonard Floyd.
Yes.
So more production, more depth, less dollars. That makes sense to me, and I think it will make sense to Ryan Pace. So then we get on to strong safety. So the strong safety, the guys that I like here, there's a list of them. But it was a guy I wanted us to get last year, which is Trey Boston. Don't understand why it took so long to get signed, but
I know
he did get signed, and it was a $3 million contract, and I can see him going for that kind of. The reasons he's a year older. I don't think his value is increased from that amount. He's had a good season, but for me, him in the box is exactly the kind of guy that you want.
I'm with you.
There's another guy that I really like, and if anyone who's watched college football, the name Carl Joseph is going to make you think, oh my God, he's just killed that man, because that's where his strength is. If you want him to play deep centre field, he's hopeless.
Yes.
If you want him in those short zones, that midfield area, coming up towards the line of scrimmage, he is an enforcer. He is someone that we can, that you're looking sort of, I'm guessing 5 to 7 million, that kind of range. But you would have your starting safety. Mm-hmm. You're looking at $2 million, going up $2 million from Clinton Dix. You're looking at a player there in Carl Joseph. If he does make it out of Oakland, they might tag him. But he's an unrestricted free agent. If he does get out of Cleveland, he's 26 years old at the moment. That's the guy that I'm happy with. Trade Boston, be happy with him. And then you're getting down to names that are sort of like much less well known. There's not really. I mean, you've got Jonathan Cyprian, DJ Swearinger that are sort of further down that list. Those are guys who might be able to offer you some value. Ibrahim Campbell, if he's fit, is another name that could offer you some value. Jaron Curse, awful in coverage, but he's a guy who can come up and hit.
Yes.
So if that's all you want him to do, he can be that he can be that role player. And he's definitely the kind of guy that you put on special teams, and the opposition team think, oh my God, he's a huge athlete who runs really fast. He's clueless, but put him up near the line, get him hitting people, that's where his strength is. So there are some guys there that's where I'm looking at spending the value. The list that I've come away with, and this is my these are the guys I would like to see as target.
Okay.
Mariota, if we can get him around about $8 million, but if not, you're looking at Keenum and the lesser known players, which would go down absolutely awfully in Chicago, I'm certain. Spencer Ware, running back from Kansas City, surplus to requirements, you're looking at vet minimum, you're looking at around about $1 million a year for him. Mm-hmm. Imagine him being the third running back in this system. Mm-hmm. That sounds like good value. Eric Ebron, depending on price. Obviously, is he worth that kind of money? That's the thing. And Ebron, I would want to see at the end of free agency. I wouldn't want to see him at the start of free agency. He'd be the guy that I'd want to see at the end. So the guys that start free agency, you're looking at Mariota, you're looking at the edge guys, you're looking at the safeties. That's the guys, the three areas we target early. And then the rest of these guys are, if they're still on the shelf, their value is coming down. It gives us a better negotiating point. It also means we can point to where we're going to be going in the draft off the back of that. Based upon who's still left in free agency and who's going to be coming down. So guys are like Quinton Spain, Ladrian Waddle, those are two guys I like on the offensive line, sort of 3 to 5 million each for those guys. So in total, with Carl Joseph will trade Boston, Vic Beasley and Matt Judon, either one of those, and for example, an Emmanuel Ogbah as the second option, you'd be looking at about $7.5, $8 million for them, whereas Leonard Floyd costs you 13. That to me makes ultimate sense. Joseph or Boston, you're looking at $3 to $5 million. That's what we were paying Clinton Dix to $2 million more. That to me makes sense. And then you can fill out obviously with what's left in free agency, but those are the guys that I want to see targeted. And those are the guys that in this draft, there are some good box safeties available in this draft. There aren't very many edge rushers. There are some really good tight ends available for a move tight end. There aren't many people that can do it all. So, but that's what we need, is a move tight end. So that kind of fits our need. But we'll come on to the draft later and the guys that I like at those positions. But for me, that's the areas I'd like to see as target. Early, we're looking at quarterback, we're looking at edge, and we're looking at safety, I believe, and then the rest of it will be filled out. Much as I would love to have Brandon Scherf, I can't see us committing that amount of cap further on the offensive line. It's a next year thing. When we can get rid of Leno or Amasi,
right,
that's when I think we can devote that to the offensive line, reinvest those dollars. But for this year, I think that's where we're going to have to look to bring in rookies who can start potentially.
Correct.
Or we're going to have to look for value when it comes later on in free agency. To see, there might be some cuts. It's something you see every single year. Someone you don't expect it gets cut, and you can pick up their contract. It's still a 5-year negotiated 5 years ago. So at the moment, it looks like good value.
Right.
If it's a 1-year rental on picking up that option, you do it. But that we won't know that until we see it.
All right.
So based upon what we do know, who is going to be out there, that's where I see us going. That's where I would like to see us going, and I hope the audience has engaged and joined in. And if you agree with me, great. And if you don't agree with me, you know where I am.
Brummy Bear says, "Take a breath, George. You're going so fast." I love the reaction that we're getting to all of this wealth of knowledge that Bearlissimo is sharing with us. Here's where we're at. We're already at an hour, and we were talking about maybe having a 45-minute show, but that's what we do here. We give you bonus coverage of Bearlissimo's thoughts on the Chicago Bears and their offseason plans. I think that what we've done here with this debut episode is set a good foundation down for what the Chicago Bears could potentially do in free agency, talked a little bit about their strategic approach to free agency. We've got to weigh where the strengths are in the draft, where the strengths are in free agency. Know that currently we're 27th with available space cap space, but there could be room to create more cap space, but it really won't move you that far up because other teams are going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be creating further cap space too. And the $10 million in additional cap dollars, every team gets additional cap dollars. The reality of the situation is that even if you let go of guys like Leonard Floyd and so forth, you're still going to be a little below average. And that's really wishful thinking. You're going to be below average of the available cap dollars. So I think that this has got to be some wise business decisions made in free agency. But first and foremost, you need a coaching staff to improve the players that you invested money in. And so if Mitch Trubisky is going to be the starting quarterback in 2020, and I think everybody will agree that you've got to bring in competition, but if you're devoted to bringing in Mitch Trubisky as the number one quarterback, then you've got to give him the offensive line to help him succeed. You've got to give him tight ends who can catch the ball because this offense is so reliant on a pass catcher. I mean, look at the biggest difference between the Chicago Bears of 2018 and 2019. It was the production from the tight end position. Trey Burton had a career year, 60-plus catches. And this year he had, 16 catches? It's unbelievable. So there's a lot of careful thought, and over the next several weeks, Bayless, Bearlissimo will be keeping us up to date on what the options are available in free agency, and then we're going to dive in. And it's really as soon as next week, we're going to dive into some of the options available at the draft position because George has been hitting the tape, and he's got a long list of players to share information. Is that a pretty good way of looking at it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we've done free agency in terms of what our options are. It's going to be dictated by, obviously, we're still getting people declaring, people going back for their senior years in college. So next week we should have that list pretty much cemented. Those who are going to come out early as juniors are going to be known. Those who aren't are obviously going to be back. But we will definitely be at a position where we kind of know a little bit more about free agency. That's going to be interesting to watch. There are some teams that are near $100 million in cap space. So we can't compete with those guys. We're going to have to be realistic about our expectations. I know there are a lot of Mitch Trubisky haters out there, but we can't go and get a top-tier quarterback because it would just kill us on the cap. I know the cap is flexible. You can't commit that much dollars for a guy who would be running for his life behind that offensive line. I think the offensive line does get inherently better with better coaching that suits the system. Harry Histam was a great coach. Thank him for his service. He's going to get a coaching gig somewhere else. Yes, but we've now got a guy who knows this system, coaches this system, coaches the techniques that are required, knows it inside out. That is a great hire for me. It's going to be interesting to see who we get as tight ends coach. But yeah, that's where we need to look going forward now is, what are the areas of the draft that we can be, again, realistic, that we could move up from, the second round to the end of the first, if we want to go up and get someone, and if that's going to be to go up and get someone, it's probably only going to be quarterback. I don't think there's going to be anyone there, to be honest, at the end of the first round that's worth taking in the first round. I think they're going to be gone by sort of pick 15, 16. And if that's the case, you may as well wait till you're on the clock at the second round, see what trade offers you get then. But we'll come on to the draft. There are a lot of positions that have some very strong depth, and there are some guys that we could definitely get as starters in both the second, I feel, and potentially even fifth rounds. So that's where our picks are. We've got 5 of our picks in those 2 rounds. Potentially comp pick in the 4th. Remains to be seen, but there are some guys I'm sure that we can target that would either be starting potential or would certainly be quality depth once they've had a bit of coaching.
Mm-hmm. Hey, before I let you go, Sunny84 has been peppering some questions your way. I want to at least get this one in. I think it's a perfect way to close the show. Sunny wants to know, which Premier League team is your favorite and why?
Premier League team, I don't have a favourite. If I was going to say one, it'd be Leicester City, because obviously that underdog story from a couple of years ago, that's a team that has really meagre resources but have really maximised what they've done. So if it's a team in the Premier League, Leicester City is probably the one. It's closest in terms of in the Premier League, other than Aston Villa, who I hate and despise. Tom Hanks, I'm sorry. Prince William, I'm sorry, but I despise Aston Villa. That's because I'm a Birmingham City fan, and it looks like that team's going to go into administration fairly shortly by the looks of things. And they're in the Championship, which is like the League Two, if you will, second league. But that would be my Premier League team, would be Leicester. I just love what they've done with the resources they've had. They play a good style of football, and they've got some good players.
Well, you got me there. I had no idea what you were talking about there, but
No worries.
I'm sure that Sonny does, and some of our other listeners. All right.
No Liverpool Football Club and no Aston Villa. I'm sorry. Liverpool are very good. They're a good side. I think they could win the Premier League again, but we'll see if they can do it in the last few games. That's where they seem to choke.
Brummy Bear says, tell George that Aston Villa, tell I said it's Aston Villa, Aldo, and listen to what he says. Okay, Colin.
Not a chance. Not a chance. And I know where he lives.
Boy, we've got a lot of knowledgeable Premier League fans. 4803 dropping some knowledge. We might have to do a Premier League show on the network here. So send me your ideas for Premier League shows. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. All right, now you and I have not rehearsed how we're going to close the show. So what I'm going to do is just let people know what's ahead on the network, and then you get the final word, and the music will come up, and we'll say goodbye. Okay? I want to let people know that tomorrow, Wednesday, live here on Mixlr.com. That's MIXLR.com at 12 noon. It's Mike North and his show, Vegas Scores and Odds Advantage. Mike will have 3 free picks for you for your gambling needs. He's 10 games above 500 currently, so if you want to make some cash, you should listen. And if you're not interested at all on gambling, the hour show, most of it is devoted to just fun football talk and sports talk, I should say. And then at 8 p.m., it's Bears 100 Proof. It's our premiere show here on the network. We will have lots of Chicago Bears talk, but it's also an irreverent take on all things sports. And by the way, we're going to have a guest on that show, the new tight end signed by the Chicago Bears from USC. He will be joining us about an hour and a half into the show, so we'll get an opportunity to talk to him. And then on Thursday, it is Draft on Tap. Danny Shimon and Ryan Badgley will take you through. They're dedicating that particular show to players that Danny and Ryan have scouted that could potentially fit with the Chicago Bears. They're going to talk mock drafts and so forth. And so if you're wondering, well, isn't that duplicating the efforts here with Bearlissimo? Yes, we're going to get lots of different viewpoints from lots of different shows about the upcoming draft. And so that will make us better prepared with knowledge once this player acquisition period really hits full steam. So that's it from me, Aldo Gandia. Bearlissimo, it's all yours.
Well, thank you for everyone that listened, and thank you for the opportunity, Aldo. I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to have a listen back and probably cringe, but that's me. I'd like to drop some Bears Barring breaking news. We have some Bears Barring breaking news. The Tape Never Lies season highlights is out now.
All right.
Get yourself on YouTube, get a watch of that. That's going to be probably an hour worth if I know Phil. He will have found all of the highlights that we have, so get watching that. and just listen to everything the Bears Bar Room does, because it's all great stuff. So keep tuning in. Shout out to Shy fans in the stands. Shout out to Uncle Mike. Shout out to the Draft on Tap guys, who are excellent, by the way. Don't always agree with everything that Danny says, but we'll come on to that, I'm sure,
Absolutely.
later on. But that's it. Peace out, bear down.